In the wake of last night's huge upset, there are many questions about what the pollsters, the pundits, and many journalists may have missed. To tackle this, we are joined by Margaret Sullivan. She is the media columnist for The Washington Post. Steve Daece, he is a popular conservative radio talk show host in Iowa. And Jim Rutenberg is a media columnist for The New York Times. And we welcome all of you to the NewsHour.
Steve Daece, I want to ask how much of this is a disconnect between the people who write the stories and the people who are out living them in the middle of the country?
I think it's a massive disconnect. And, you know, I'm somebody who used to work at a major city newspaper, which is considered mainstream or liberal media. I've done a lot of work with USA Today and MSNBC, which are considered the same, because I like to engage people that have different ideas than me and maybe even persuade them. But, I mean, how many people in the newsroom here right now at PBS, how many that work here? How many are pro-life? How many of them go to church or to Mass once a week? How many of them voted for Trump? And I think there's a lot of talk of a lack of diversity. There's a huge lack of ideological and cultural diversity in our newsrooms, and I think that's creating a massive disconnect nationwide.
Steve Daece, you know, you brought up a moment ago, journalists, the whole disconnect point. You know, we've strived, I think, in newsrooms for years to become, as we like to put it, more like America, to be more diverse. But I hear you saying we've missed a whole chunk of the country in our effort to be diverse.
I don't think there's any question about this. I read something an LA Times film critic said a year ago when American Sniper was the #1 movie. And he said, listen, the only people surprised this is the #1 movie are the people that live in the two coasts and haven't visited the 47 states in between. You know what Margaret said about some of the things Trump said? I mean, that's why I was #NeverTrump. I was disturbed by those things. But you know what also disturbed me? To hear Hillary Clinton say that I am her, quote, enemy. The comments that were made in the previous segment from the WikiLeaks emails calling Christians backwards. The fact that those of us who think that we shouldn't have men in bathrooms next to our young daughters are called bigots when we should just call them parents. Those things create a backlash as well. So I don't fault the media for thinking that Trump couldn't get elected because of his incendiary comments. The fault, though, comes in the fact that an equal light was not shed on Hillary's incendiary comments and the backlash that created against her, which we saw in the vote total last night.
Jim Rutenberg, what about that?
Yeah, I think that what we learned from the lack of reaction, I think this is where we see the disconnect, how we ask ourselves, and including some never-Trump Republicans, did the incendiary commentary from Mr. Trump not create a backlash, and how did he get elected in spite of it all? And I think that goes to, again, not understanding the level of anger in other parts of the country, and to my point, certain people everywhere. And they care much more about the ills that Mr. Trump was promising to cure than they cared about whatever personal traits we were writing about in our coverage.
Steve Daece, it's such a big subject to look at how the media and a president interact. But if there were mistakes made in the campaign, how can the media, shall we say, be closer to the mark in how we approach covering the Trump presidency?
You know, I think one of the big things, people misunderstood Fox's original appeal when it was launched 20 years ago. Its original appeal is that it looked at institutions of Americana, the military, churches, the family. It did not look or view them with instantaneous suspicion, because most Americans do not. And frankly, a lot of people that live in more progressive enclaves do. So I think, for example, treating those institutions that a lot of what you like to call flyover country, or as the other guest pointed out, Long Island, would consider to be Americana, but to deal with them objectively, I think that is key. And I also fear that the media has maybe made a mistake with Trump that we conservatives made with Bill Clinton in the 90s, where we were so over the top, so hysterical in our condemnations and conspiracies and the like, that when something serious came along, like a president lying under oath to a federal grand jury, a lot of Americans just sort of waved their hand, Judy, and said, oh, you guys are always the boy who cried wolf. In many respects, you guys have almost insulated Trump from any legitimate criticism he may have as president, because they're just going to roll their eyes and say, there goes the media again.
Well, there's much more to discuss here. And again, it's the first day after this election. These are all conversations that will continue. But thank you very much, all three. Steve Daece, Jim Rutenberg, Margaret Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Hari.
Thank you.